Hi, this is Jody with Real Progress in Action. Over the past few days, we've watched a surreal situation unfold in Minneapolis, Minnesota. Following the death of George Floyd, he was murdered by a police officer, essentially. In response to this, many people have taken to the streets, understandably upset at what's going on. Today we have some of the people who have been involved, who have attended the protests, who have witnessed a lot of the chaos. So I'd like to welcome Ryan Rantanen. He is a member of Socialist Alternative and Twin Cities DSA. Also Adam Birch. He is also a member of Socialist Alternative. Brad Svensson is actually running for Minnesota Congressional District 5. He's going to join us today as well. And a friend of the show that you guys may recognize, Steve Tuckner. He's also a volunteer with Twin Cities DSA. All of these people have been around for what's been going on. And without further ado, let's get their perspective on what's been happening on the streets and what we need to do from here on out. So to kind of start off this conversation, I'm sure we're all a little bit familiar with what has been happening in Minneapolis, but to start this off, Ryan, can you tell us a little bit about, kind of give us the overview of what exactly happened with George Floyd?
Yeah, so tragic situation, and basically my understanding is it started when the proprietors or owners of Cup Foods, which is a business in Minneapolis at Chicago and 38th Street there, called the police on someone who was supposedly trying to pass a forged check, or maybe it was forged money. And so once the police got out there, there's multiple different pieces of footage running around out there, and I haven't seen them all, but the one I think we've all seen is the one that showed George Floyd being pinned to the ground with the officer Derek Chauvin at his knee on his neck. And yeah, so that was the precipitating incident, and I found out about it through Communities Against Police Brutality, I think, was sharing information about it, and I joined the protest.
Of course, you know, we're finding out more and more about this all the time, and kind of more details are coming out. But essentially, I mean, it just seems very, very basic. You know, I mean, it's a very simple situation. Here's a person, whatever happened, it's such a small infraction, and yet the reaction to it was so overblown. So you were actually there on Tuesday. So it happened on Tuesday, and you were actually there Tuesday evening. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like that night and what you saw?
Yeah. So it was really, upon arriving, it was very peaceful protest. Everybody was very passionate about the situation, and it was really good to see that, you know, working class folks of every ethnicity and type were out there. You know, it wasn't just the Black community, it was just as many people of every other race, creed, and origin. And so it was, you know, it was really brotherly, and there were occasionally, there were actually cars that had blocked off the intersection, which I assume that was maybe the organizers were involved in that. And there was, you know, the standard chanting and lots of signs. People were doing their best to social distance. It was a difficult situation to make social distancing work, but people were definitely making a best effort to do so. But it was hard to hear the speakers if you weren't close enough. So there was a lot of movement around there too. Yeah, and then after about I don't know, I would say maybe an hour, hour and a half there. The protest started about 5 p.m. and I would say 6:37 we started marching to the 3rd precinct Minneapolis Police Station. And again, you know, very very comradely situation there. Lots of brotherly love, essentially. Lots of support from everybody along the way. People were sitting in lawn chairs with signs supporting the movement, and we all marched peacefully to the police station. And once we were there, there were speakers that were trying to guide the crowd in chants, and yeah, that's the good part.
And so Adam, you were there as well on Tuesday evening. What was it like from your perspective?
Yeah, I think like what was striking to me is kind of like you wake up on Tuesday morning, and of course you have text messages, you have Facebook posts that show this horrible tragic event, and you're kind of at least I am kind of rubbing the sleep out of my eyes. I'm trying to like interpret all this, and I think like as the day or like as as we got closer and closer to the evening, like more and more video and more information just kind of came out surrounding his death, which I think, or his murder, which I think like kind of like even further enraged the people that came out, including myself, because I think obviously under no circumstances at all would it possibly be justifiable for the police to murder George Floyd the way they did, or in any way. But I think what initially the Minneapolis Police Department initially released a press statement that said that George Floyd was resisting arrest. And they kept emphasizing that in their statement. And I think by Tuesday evening, there was another security footage video from the establishment across the street from Cup Foods that showed footage before the footage that most people are familiar with the officer's knee on George. And it showed the officers approaching the car that George was in. And when the officers approached the driver's side door, where George was sitting, the big video shows George exiting the car, being put in handcuffs. There's also 2 other people in the car who exited, and another officer was kind of dealing with them. After George was put in handcuffs, he was led by the officer over to the sidewalk where he sat calmly with his legs crossed for several minutes. And so all this kind of like I think showed to anybody that saw the footage and heard what the police department's testimony was, that their testimony was a complete lie. George at no point was resisting arrest enough where even more than one officer had to come and assist him being put in handcuffs. And George, I think people are seeing pictures. I mean, he's a big guy, and I think like if he was resisting at all, it would have required at least 2 police officers to apprehend him, but of course never did. And then so George is, and again, like the officer that ended up killing George again is not on the scene yet. George is then led from where he's sitting across the street, still in handcuffs, to the place where George is killed, and then the security footage doesn't capture, because it goes out of view, kind of what happened in the moments between George being led across the street to the officer putting his knee on his neck. And so I'm just saying all this to the point where it's just like George was clearly in police custody for several minutes for a very long time before before the incident, before he even had the knee on his neck. So I think like all this kind of like just stoked a lot of anger from people who were paying attention, and I think like so yeah, at the protest itself, by the time we got there, I mean the mood was intense, but I think a lot of people were determined to get justice for George Floyd. Of course, if we want to go back even further in the history of, I mean, not so far distant past of Minneapolis, there's been a history of the Minneapolis Police Department um, uh, killing unarmed black men. There was the incident on the north side with Jamar Clark. And then there was the incident in Falcon Heights, which is in a suburb of Minneapolis, where Philando Castile was killed in 2016. Jamar Clark was killed in 2015. So there was this kind of like, there was a lot of, and there was never justice served for Jamar Clark and for Philando Castile, among others that I'm forgetting. And so there's just a lot of like, so there's just a complete mistrust, and there's absolutely really no confidence in the city political establishment. Of course, with the Minneapolis Police Department, there's absolutely no trust that Jacob Fry, the mayor, will do what's necessary to meet the protesters' demands. There's absolutely, of course, no trust in Trump's FBI independent investigation that the mayor has called for. There's very little trust that Hennepin County Attorney Mike Freeman will do the right thing and bring charges and convict. And so I think like when there's this deep level of mistrust among particularly the Black community, when they don't get justice, there's the tendency to want to take things obviously into our own hands. And so what I think has transpired over the last 48 hours is completely, well, it's just not surprising that people would, take these kind of measures. And so I think I just want to like underline like Brian's point too, when we started marching from 38th in Chicago to the 3rd precinct, it was quite a long march. I mean, it's a few miles of distance. And so we marched along 38th Street or 38th Avenue, 38th Street east, and all along 38th Street. People, it's a very heavy residential area, a lot of single family homes and small apartment buildings. Many people came outside showing signs of, it's a very working class neighborhood, so a lot of people just were completely, showing signs of support and coming out to wave as the march walked or made its way down the street. Even people that were stuck in traffic on 38th, they actually honked and got out of their cars and showed support. And this continued even actually until we were walking along Hiawatha. And Hiawatha now, this is a big thoroughfare that runs north to south. And the protest was so big, the march was so big that we were able to take up the both northbound and southbound lanes. And again, the people that were caught in traffic were honking and showing support there too as well. And just to kind of give an idea of how incredibly, I mean, if you're not familiar with Minneapolis, but I'll say it anyway, like along Hiawatha basically from Lake Street, which is where the 3rd precinct is, all the way back to 30th Avenue, it was just completely packed with people. And so this kind of gives just kind of a bit of perspective of how impressive this show of force was and how many people in Minneapolis and the surrounding area are demanding justice for George Floyd, and I was happy to be a part of that.
Absolutely. And I think you really captured it when you talked about kind of these different things that have happened, and nowadays, of course, we have videos, so we're seeing a lot more, what actually happens in these moments. But these are things that, on a national level, they get shrugged off in a way that is very demeaning. I think that's, essentially where, one of the reasons why Black Lives Matter resonates with people, because it gets ignored. And this was definitely, it was very clear what had happened and that it was unnecessary. And fortunately, we do have video of that. Yeah, it's at least encouraging to see that so many people are coming out to support. So of course, kind of things moved on. So as we're going through the progression, the kind of timeline, of course, by Wednesday, there was more information coming out throughout this whole thing. Of course, we know that the officer has been involved in many situations at this point that he was never held accountable for. And on Wednesday, of course, people convened again. And Steve, you were there for the Wednesday protest. Can you tell us a little bit about, what was that going into, this is the following day? What was the situation then, and what was your perspective of what was going on then?
Well, I don't mean to derail the interview, but I'm kind of actually interested to find out like what happened to the peaceful protest as it approached or when did it turn into tear gas and everything like that on Tuesday? Because I could just give the experience on Wednesday. We went to buy a bunch of supplies and deliver them. So for people who were at the protest, we bought 15 gallons of milk. We bought 20 things of water. We brought snacks, fruit, so on and so forth. And we drove, there's a Target right across the street from the precinct. And we drove in the Target parking lot as close as we could get to the corner, thinking, okay, we'll start unloading our supplies. And when we got there, we just said start unloading a little bit. And then it was like crash, bang, tear gas, flash grenades. So I got tear gas for the first time in my life, and everybody ran like heck. And my car is in the middle of the tear gas cloud, right? I'm thinking, oh, geez. And we probably ran away about, 2 blocks or a long city block, and then ran into somebody who had some water and some milk and put that. And thankfully I was wearing a face mask, and I think that helped with the breathing, right? Like I said, I'm a novice at this. I haven't been tear gas before. And so then after that cleared up, I just went down there and got my car. We drove back to sort of where we ran to, because we thought there's no point in having milk down there where, you want to have the milk where you're going to run to, not where you get tear gassed. So we went and we unloaded our stuff, and then I took off. And so, yeah, so my experience of it wasn't very long. I think at that point also, I want to say that the Target, which I think was the first place that was looted, was not yet looted. And the other thing I guess I want to say is that when the tear gas and all that happened, I mean, I wasn't like right in the middle of the intersection across the street from the precinct, but I don't think there was anything going on that warranted tear gas. And I mean, there were people there and they were yelling, but I don't know if there was anything that was going on that actually warranted that, because it's a pretty extreme. I mean, if you've ever been tear gas, it's not pleasant at all. And, you would want to use that in a situation that was out of hand. And it didn't seem like anything was out of hand. So that's my experience on Wednesday. If you want to, I could just, I'll just do this now if you want to finish with Brad. And that's that tonight we were driving, we live in St. Paul. We were driving along University Avenue. University Avenue runs all the way between downtown St. Paul and downtown Minneapolis. And And there's been looting in St. Paul now. Like we just said, let's go out after dinner. Let's see what's going on. There's been a lot of sirens. And we saw, looks like Asian grocery store. There was people running in there. We saw another store, which I think I looked up, is probably like an African grocery store. That was more near, so that was, the first one was near like Dale University, and this was near like Hamlin University. And there was something burning. We didn't get close enough to see it. And there were a lot of people driving around in cars, hanging out the cars, like sitting on the window sill of the seat, and then with their hands on top of the roof. And just, there was a lot of activity, people driving around. Like, it's now become, it's sort of spun out of control now, right? Like people are like, okay, where do we go next? Where do we go next? And it looks like, that's what's happening, right? So, yeah, so that's my story.
Yeah, I'd love to hear. I know that Brad was there for a really long time on Wednesday evening. I think what I had heard was from 4 p.m. until like 1 a.m. or something. Brad, can you tell us a little bit about your experience? And Brad is actually coming to this as a candidate for that district. So what was your experience like when you were there on Wednesday night, Brad?
Well, it's funny because I had started off on Tuesday as well, actually, with the other guys, but I had actually been going out. I had just announced my candidacy for CD5 on Sunday. So this was a very new thing. Nobody knew. And we're in the middle of our petition gathering time too. So what we're dealing with was my 15-year-old daughter and I, we were going to go down and start getting petitions, and this thing is happening while we're trying to do that. And it was the craziest time that I'd ever seen. I've never politically ever had to deal with something like this. This is crazy. We got out of there. So we actually stopped getting signatures and we went to 38th in Chicago, and we were there for a few hours. We didn't march. We left then, and that's when we started hearing all the police sirens and things like that. It sounded like things had gone a little sideways. And at that point in my head, I thought, man, this is not going to stop. Things are going to get worse, and I've got to come back out tomorrow. And I went back on Wednesday, so yesterday, and there wasn't a lot of people at 38th in Chicago, and I was curious about what had happened at Precinct 3. And I got there, and it was thousands of people. It was insane. I wasn't prepared for the magnitude, if that makes any sense. And at that point, it was just, all right, break out the phone. Let's just stream everything we can right now and go. And I did. It was unbelievable, just the amount of things that were happening. And man, it was peaceful. It was loud. It was crazy. And then things just kind of broke loose. All hell broke loose, and there was nothing that seemed to catalyze it. Nothing that was a catalyst that was said, "Oh wow, there's violence." It was just all of a sudden rubber bullets and tear gas. And Steve, you got hit once with tear gas. I got it 6 times last night, and it's terrible once. It's terrible 3 times. It's terrible 6 times. It's unbelievable. I in fact had to stop streaming a couple times because of it. I couldn't breathe. It sounded like it was my daughter was actually watching me streaming too when it happened. They thought I had been hit or taken out. Something had happened. It devolved into chaos. But the chaos was not generated by us. It wasn't and by us I mean everybody that wasn't a police officer. We were not the ones instigating in general. And again, there were some bad actors. I think that was one of the terms people have used. There were some bad actors, but the vast majority of us were standing there, hands up, streaming or filming or just chanting, and nothing was happening. And then all of a sudden, random bursts of tear gas and rubber bullets. we stopped counting at 12. I had 12 come like fly close enough for me to feel it on the hair on my arms and my legs. I felt it. Actually, I shouldn't say I heard it before I felt it twice by my ear. These less than lethal rounds are not what people have in their head. They're violent. They leave marks. They put people down, and it was unbelievable. I had somebody on the stream even say, this looks like Mogadishu, or like they were giving these comparisons to a war zone. And I'm trying to argue with it, and I can't. I literally can't. It was unbelievable what was happening. It was beautiful, though, in that we as a group, bad actors and all, would back up for a sec. We'd regroup, but we never left. And as the night went on, it got bigger and bigger. And it was unbelievable. I wish I could have had other people there, like, my daughter, who's very active in these types of things. And I'm glad that she wasn't, because of all the things that happened. I get it. But there's an experience here that when you have to stand up and you have to do something, even tear gas and rubber bullets and this terrible situation will not stand in the way. And that's what we did. It's become a worldwide phenomenon, sorry. And in fact, one video that I have is of a guy who was knocking out the windows of the auto parts store. Now, oh gosh, what is it? AutoZone. And it has, and my daughter just texted me, about 400,000 views between yesterday and right now. And it's multiplying, it's spreading. I didn't expect this to be that, right? This was just, we have to document it. We have to show what's going on. Nothing was being shown on the news that was actually specific to us. It was about protecting businesses and the police, and how terrible all the stream. You see that the violence, the things that happened, were always instigated by the police. Now, I say always in generalizing. I don't mean it as every time. It wasn't. But there was a point. It was almost like they were trying to instigate us into more deadly or horrible action against them. There were times I had people watching or listening to the scanner, and they were calling the fire department away. They wouldn't let them through. They had somebody actually release some information about how we were attacking the fire department. And the fire department showed up. We were tear gassed, and honestly, for the last 30 some odd hours, phone service has been spotty as hell. In some places it seemed almost planned. I hate saying it because I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it is what it is. And so the fire department, so the police actually announced that we were attacking and impeding fire department activities. And I had video of every single time the fire department showed up. I was there. I was literally 20 feet away. And every single time they showed up, the police showed up first. They tear gassed us. They shot at us. And they came after us with a vengeance. So it wasn't us impeding anything. I had multiple people on the scanners. They were actually holding the fire department back from saving certain places. One of the people that was with me later in the evening does construction, concrete and stuff, and there's a massive gas pipe under the auto parts store, and apparently, and again through the scanners, they knew that too, and that's why they actually sent the fire department into that area. Otherwise, nothing else was being taken care of. Nothing. They were not coming after it, and they were blaming us for everything. We were the instigators. We were the bad people. We were the ones doing all these bad things. And I think if you look at it from an outside perspective, you can see how smart it is on their part to say that, because it makes them look better in the grand scheme of this whole situation. Oh, it's all these bad people. It's a criminal, or it's this or that. And honestly, if the news is going to report it like that and take everything that they say as gospel, well, that's what people are going to believe. My videos, when I showed what people are showing right now, are literally dispelling these lies. And I sound like I'm this weird conspiracy theorist, and I'm not. I'm really not. And I was there for so long. It was actually there till 2. I was streaming till 1:30. And then right before the apartment building, the one that was under construction, started on fire, the whole building itself. I got that one later, as a report. So I missed that part. But even the fires that were started at the building just outside of it, I have the people on video streamed live who did that. No fire department, nothing from anybody but police shooting and gassing us. And almost always it was random. It was insane. I know that they were shooting. I was in one of the, gosh, I wish I could even tell you what time it was. I lost track of time. There was a man who had been shot by a rubber bullet, but in the head, and he was bleeding profusely on the ground. There was teams of medics there too. Medics that were just us. They were just people who were prepared for it. And this guy had gotten hit. He was on the ground. The medics were there, and we surrounded him, actually. So I'm streaming as we're surrounding and trying to protect him, and the police are shooting at us. Okay, we're doing nothing. Our hands are up. Okay, we were the targets. And they're not going to tell you that. They're going to tell this story about this terrible person who was doing, throwing rocks or something. And the reality is we weren't doing anything but standing there. And this is the sound of a rubber bullet, the pop. People thought it was 22s going off. The streams were just filled with, oh my God, are those real bullets? You guys aren't shooting. No, they're shooting at us. We didn't have weapons. We did not do anything. The things that were breaking. Now, again, were there people doing bad things? Yes. People broke out the windows on the police station. It happened. And it came after they attacked us. They threw things at us. They instigated it. They pushed. I don't condone it, but I can't say I don't. I'm not surprised. I told him, it sounds cheesy, and I apologize, but I keep telling people the same thing: is that riots are the voice of the unheard. It's a Martin Luther King thing. It is. That's what we are. It's so true. And I'm going to interrupt real quick, and I apologize. I have crews everywhere right now because I'm in my car. I'm on my way to go stream again. And I have a crew down at the 3rd precinct, and the police abandoned it. The people are actually invading the 3rd precinct right now. So that literally just came across my text, my crew, the guys who are on scene. So yeah, that's how crazy this is. I know the National Guard is coming in. It's where's it going to go? And I'm afraid, and I haven't responded to my guys yet. I probably should here in just a little bit, but this could devolve into this one of the scariest things I've ever seen. And if they're able to make this lie that we were the bad people, we deserve what we got, a truth to this society and to the world, there's no chance. There's no win. There's no outcome that we get that works. And we can't have that. We can't. And that's why we're here. It's why I'm sitting in this car talking to you guys. It has to go. It has to go anywhere. I told everybody on staff, I don't care who wants to talk to me. In fact, while I was listening to some of the other guys talk here before me, I got 2 interview requests from hardcore Trump supporters. I'm not one of them, but I'm going to talk about this. I don't care who. If you're going to talk, if you're willing to just even sit there and talk to me, I don't care. Call me. Listen, I'm 6'2", 300 pounds, and look like I might eat your mom. Okay, you can call me all you want. I can handle it. But if I have a chance to put this word out, any information I have I'm going to. And it's now it's just truth. It's facts. It's not about opinions or possibilities. It's, no, they said this and it's wrong, and here's how I can prove it. It's right here. And again, actually, I just got another text. We're at about 430,000 views on those videos. It's growing. It's exponential. I'm getting Twitter notifications that it just doesn't stop. And so the word is getting out. It's just, it's got to be more. It has to be these conversations. It has to be an honest spoken truth without, you looked at, I was going to tear up. It's terrible. My kids watched this, right? Like, how do you walk into a situation and you know that your kids are watching this happen to you? And that is this, man, like, what words do I have to even explain that? I don't. It hurts. It's scary. But the joke is, you ever seen National Treasure? I think there was a statement, one of my staff guys always says, if you have the ability, you have the responsibility. I have the ability, so I'm going to go do it. I'm going to go out, and I'm going to keep moving. So, yeah, it's weird. I know I kind of tangents there, but that's kind of where we're at.
I absolutely appreciate it. I think, I think this situation, and you know what, I just want to call out and kind of reiterate what you were saying about riots are the voice of the unheard. And I think that this is definitely indicative, because what we're seeing is, we see this happening over and over and over again. And we see people going out and calling it out and saying, this is what's happening. And yet they're, to use a popular phrase these days, gaslighting, but that's what they're doing. People, it gets, I don't know how to say it and give it as much weight as it needs to have, because I don't want to say it casually or cavalierly, because it's unbelievable. And then this is the product of that situation. So if they are able to gaslight about this situation, that is a product of gaslighting. I thank you so much for getting out and recording that, and making sure that the real story is told. And we at Real Progressives and Real Progress in Action, we will do absolutely everything that we can to make sure that voice is amplified as well.
Well, I'm asking. I've been getting requests for permission to use the video, and I'm not taking any money on this thing. I don't make any money on this, guys. I want it out there. I don't want any restrictions on people using it. I have been asking for credit. Just credit me, please. Just let people know it's me. I want, not because I like having me be the me, part of it, but it has to have some sort of weight. It has to be a person that did it. It's not some random guy. I'm putting myself into the public for a reason. And so if there's a way for that to be a serious thing, my name has to be a part of it, so that there's this chain of custody, if that makes any sense. Like, it's a real thing. It's not some BS, vague thing that was recorded. No, it's 10 hours of recording from this one guy, and we know who that guy is, and we can talk to him. That's a powerful thing, even if it doesn't seem like it, when you realize that, no, we can go to the source and he's available at all times. That's a big thing. And I'm not hiding. I'm not. I was going to actually bring my daughter again today, but with the National Guard here, I can't. I will not. They're going to use real guns. I'm still going, and I'm not going to stop. And I can't stop. I cannot do this now, because that narrative that I want to swear so bad, that BS narrative that we get just can't be the final word. And if that's what I do, and that's my legacy, then I can help straighten that. And that's awesome. This is, my daughter's so excited that this is the thing that could help define who I am. And I as goofy as that sounds, we shouldn't allow these external things to define us, but it's something that they can be proud of, and nobody can take it. And that's awesome. So.
Okay, I'll tell you, I see that. I absolutely identify with that. I hope that my kids are proud of me for what I do. And
Absolutely.
I'm sure that your daughter is proud of you. for what you're doing right now. This is amazing. And I know that you have to go. And so I just want to give you an opportunity real quick, because I know that, of course I didn't realize that you had just announced that you're running. Wow.
Monday. Yeah.
So
can I butt in here a second?
Yeah,
Please.
yeah. I'm just not sure if Brad needs to go, so I just wanted to give him.
I got a couple more minutes. I don't want to.
Okay.
I want to get to my cruise. I don't want them out there risking their lives without me there. So
Yeah,
that's
it's just
fair.
I wanted to have you highlight that part in your video that you took where the guy was going through and busting the window and he had the helmet on with the. Just talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no problem. So this is the thing that's breaking this whole stream out. And in fact, I when I first woke up, there was somebody who had a video of this guy in a, dressed up like that, and saying, "Oh, it's a police officer." It was just this. It seemed like this BS, conspiracy theory, and all of a sudden, I started getting texts and messages. Well, hey, Brad, there's this guy. This is the same guy that's in that video. And all of a sudden you start putting all the pieces together in all the different videos. So there's a guy who's in a black jacket. In fact, I think it's a jacket with a hood, full gas mask, gloves, and an umbrella. And I'm not filming the first window hit. I'm pointing towards where the police are shooting at us. And I hear the glass and I turn the camera to it. And then you see him methodically hit each window in series with a hammer, and very deliberately. It wasn't just this and to be honest with you, a lot of bad actors that I watched and filmed, it's very haphazard. It's like, okay, get quick, get it done. This was methodical. It was well timed. It was very interesting how he was doing it. And then a bystander, a young black man, interrupted him, said, "Hey, what are you doing? This is not what we're here for." And he kept going. He kept hitting out the windows. And I probably swore a few times. I swore a lot there. I'm going to be perfectly honest with you. Bullets flying around you, tear gassing. I swore a lot. But I tell people this is a terrible thing. We can't be doing this. This is ruining the message. And I turn away. And at that moment, a whole bunch of other people actually were filming him walk away. And so in those videos, which are not mine, and you can find them, they're getting cut together with my video now so that we can actually see this. It's a white man who is covered head to toe, and you cannot see any identifying marks besides his eyes. And he, in fact, pushes through some of these protesters who try to stop and talk to him. And he walks off. And here's the thing. And having been there for 10 hours, people who are doing bad things, when presented with resistance from their own group, generally stop. And generally, I mean, once in 1,000, they don't. When resistance happens, because they're part of the group. This is herd mentality. They kind of break out. This guy had a mission. He was on a mission, and nothing was going to stop him. So it's possible. Yes, it wasn't something insidious, but the reality is he was resisted against, he was pushed against, and he did his mission. And it was clockwork. And this is the biggest part of what I did, is that there's this thing, and I'm the only guy who got the video of him actually doing the window breaking. Because at first it was started out that they said he started the fires, and he didn't. He broke the windows out very methodically, and that was the start. And now we're trying to figure out who it is and what and why. And again, another thing here. I'm closer to 480,000 not likes, but views. It's almost 500. Yeah, I'm getting texts as we do this. It's scary. So yeah, that's kind of where this whole thing is leading. And while I think the whole narrative that I presented, the stream is important, there's this thing, and the world is finding this thing to be the most interesting thing. And I agree. I think it's something we have to look at, and we need to take it. And so, yeah, that's kind of, was there anything else I missed, Steve? I know we talked a little bit, and I talked for 10, 12 hours yesterday, and I'm like, I can hear my voice going away now too. What
Is
else?
that-
Do you have other questions, or did I
No,
miss anything?
that was it. The latest on that was that I saw a tweet where somebody is comparing his face to a St. Paul cop. But I
Oh,
don't know
yeah.
if that it's not definitive or anything. It said he's been identified, but who knows, right? So
I had the same thing happen, but they were actually comparing it to Derek. Is it Derek Chauvin or the guy who actually had his knee on Floyd's neck? The man who killed Floyd they're comparing his picture, and it's a useless. You guys, it's his eyes. If you saw my son and I together with just eyes, you'd think, oh yeah, same guy. That kind of thing. So I'm not saying anything. I won't agree with anything here. I will say though that there's a lot of similarities. And again, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but holy crap, what is going on here? This is insane. It's absolutely insane.
No, I'll tell you, it was interesting. We were having this conversation earlier, and I've been to a lot of protests. I've been to a lot of actions and things like that. And it's there's only so many times that you can see, that one person or that one or two people coming, and they're the people who bring the violence or bring the aggression, and everyone else is peaceful. Yet the whole thing gets painted as this violence, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know the whole story. I don't want to, make any, I don't know anything about it, but yeah, but it's very interesting. And I did see your video on that. I also saw other videos of, people just getting to not even being really violent, but getting aggressive, and the protest leaders, calling it out, getting on the mic and saying, hey, we're here in a peaceful way and blah, 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 blah. And that person being escorted out by other people who were there at the protest. So,
yeah.
Like you said, it is this mentality, this, group mentality where everyone is trying to keep the peace. And then there's just that one or two people. And as far as I saw, there were a lot of people who are trying to control that. I think when it comes down to it, it's a very interesting situation to see the reaction from the police, and I shouldn't even say that, because it's not even the reaction. This is peaceful, and we can compare this just to a few weeks ago when we had the protesters against the stay-at-home orders, who were there and gun toting, whatever, and they show up, and yet they don't meet any type of resistance, and those people, everything's fine, and yet this situation happens, I would say, in response to something a lot more worthy of protest, and these people show up, and then it becomes this, it's preempted. I don't even want to say reacted to by the police. It's preempted by the police in a very aggressive and violent way.
That's the thing. I think whenever we look back at situations like this, it's always the after effect, the after care, of all the things of the police or even the government, they for cover-ups, for even like how the police are acting now. This could have been handled so differently. It could have still happened, but then they could have, as a police force, said, whoa, this isn't going to work. This is wrong. We are taking a stand on this. And it's just been lip service, and they've tried to turn it. And if it's a simple decision-making process that it never seems that they could just go, no, we were wrong. This is wrong. And if that's, how hard is that? I know I try to teach my kids, just accept that. Wrong is okay. Wrong gets you to right. Wrong gets you to a better understanding of what's going on. And you're allowed to be wrong. We're always wrong. Guys, how many times do you make a bad decision every day? We do. It just happens. And this was a terrible decision. This was something that is unconscionable. I'm not trying to minimize that whatsoever. Officer, and again, is it Chauvin? I think it's Chauvin, did something terrible. But as a group, as a group of law enforcement officers who are there to literally protect and serve, they need to be able to stand up and go, no, this was wrong, and we need to learn from it. But now it's just a different action. And that, I think that's the simplest thing. I think we had asked earlier, what can we do? Guys, it's about accepting being wrong. It's about accepting ways to find truth in an honest way. But this is a situation where we have to get rid of this BS idea that we can't be wrong and we're not wrong, and you as the bad guy are always wrong too. And statistically speaking, that's not right. That's not the way things work. And they could have done this a hell of a lot different, and they didn't. And there's so much more. I have a list. I have so many things we can talk about. And again, I do have to get going, but it's a powerfully simple statement to say, admit your fault, tell the world you're wrong and how you're going to fix it, and take the consequences of the actions, know it, own it, and move on and learn from it. And they just aren't. They're going to be it's going to be forced on them. They are literally, we as a group, unfortunately, now own their building. That's an insane situation. I just got a phone call from my crew. Things are probably happening right now. And I don't mean own it. We don't own it. We don't, you know what I mean? The thing is, though, is that we wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have had to deal with tear gas. They own it, they move on, and they take the consequences of their actions. This is not hard. That's not crazy. But now a whole bunch of people took over Precinct 3. This is a movie, right, guys? Like, it was assault on Precinct 3. It's not 13, right? That shouldn't be happening. We shouldn't be living Hollywood lives trying to just get a black man's life to mean something. Guys, this is insane. Admit you're wrong. Move on and do it right. Learn from it. No, they're not. And now those people, the people that are there now, are going to make them pay. And it sucks. It sucks so bad that it even has to be that way. So sorry, I know I'm talking a lot. There has to be something better, and that's simple. It's simple.
Yeah, and my apologies. I feel like I should have gotten this in there earlier. I was trying to give everybody else a chance to speak too. There's definitely a point at which things seemed to turn sour on Tuesday night when I was there too. And it was about a little bit before 8 o'clock, where we were at the 3rd precinct after we'd marched to the precinct. And there was just a lull in the speakers, and people started to kind of move around. And at some point, I heard a pop, and I think we were all scared that it was a gunshot, of course. But I got around to the back of the police station there, and there was one window that was broken out. At which point there were a lot of people that were standing around saying, we got to keep this peaceful. But I guess it was kind of lost in the melee what was going on. Well, melee is not the right word. The commotion. I wasn't sure exactly who threw that. I didn't see it. I don't know how that window got broken. But after that, within a minute or two, another window got broken. And then after that, there were people that, actually a group of protesters lined themselves up in front of the door to the police station in the back there, and were trying to protect the glass, to protect the station. There was one person that apparently had a brick in his hand, and another person, I didn't even register their faces, but there was a struggle, and the brick actually got thrown backwards and hit me in the leg. And so that's, it was difficult. I was trying to figure out how, what's the appropriate thing for me to do here. But so I guess I just tried to look out for people that were causing trouble. And at one point I did see a young man it was a young white man that had a backpack, and he pulled a brick out of it. Or I don't know if he was trying to put it in or pull it out, but I saw he had it in his hand at some point, and I said, "Hey, let's get this guy out of here." And some people did try and get him out of there, but they didn't follow him all the way out of the area. And so I did, a minute or two later, see him walk past me and give me the middle finger. And then at that point, there was a couple of people who started trying to talk to me and be like, "Hey, what's your problem, man?" And I'm like, my problem is we don't want to eliminate all the good work we're doing here. We want a peaceful movement, and this is not helpful. And it was alarmingly simple response was that, they're killing us every day. What are we supposed to do? Which really, it's hard to answer that question. Because I know the thing is that there have been a lot of killings, and the Black community is taking the brunt of the damage here. But the nice thing is that everybody was there to support them. This is the community is all about supporting them, as far as I've seen. But that was a difficult situation, and but so shortly after that, then there were people trying to get into the lot where there were cars behind the police station there. And at that point, I said, no, this is time for me to bail. I can't be participating in this. And at that point, I decided it was time to go home. By the time I got a block or two further down, then there was tear gas being shot out. And I did take a couple minutes of video of that. But yeah, it just kind of, the situation escalated very quickly, very far. There was clouds of tear gas coming from that parking lot in the back there, and yeah, I watched for a few minutes, but the tear gas was still coming towards me anyway. I felt like I should add that, and I'm sorry, I didn't mean to neglect it.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. I know actually you had told me about that when we were talking last night, and I should have asked about that as well. It's just, it's amazing. It sounds like a war zone. I mean, we don't think about these things being, America, but this is America. This is the situation, this is the situation that we're in. And I think that what this shows is that this is the desperation we're all in, and, people are in desperate situations. And then how do you deal with that if you don't actually fix the underlying, I always come back to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? Like, why don't we have the basics met? The basics should be met. We live in the wealthiest society in the world. Why don't we have the basics met? And then yet, what do we do with that? We just clamp down on it harder and harder and harder. We don't actually fix the problem. We clamp down on it harder and harder. And then things like this are inevitable. So excuse my little rant on the situation. And, of course, there's so many things that go into this. Yeah.
The one thing I would say about it is just that you have a group of people that have no stake in the system. They've got no stake. So burn it down, whatever, it just doesn't matter, right? That's why that happens. They've got nothing to lose. When you got nothing to lose, then stuff like this happens. And also it's a matter of, dignity, right? The community's just been shit on, for so long that, something like this, you start a fire and it's really hard to put out.
And we're absolutely seeing, we're just, just recently, 2 other murders of African Americans that are just police going into a place and shooting indiscriminately, just, oh, no problem. Or these guys taking the law into their own hands and just saying, oh yeah, well, we are judge, jury, and executioner, and apparently deputized, or whatever that whole story is. Just, it's, yeah, we still have a serious issue with race in this country, and the way that that people are treated just based on the assumptions that people make because of the color of their skin. It's real. And people want to act like it doesn't exist. But
yes. I'm going to interrupt here, and I apologize.
Go for it.
I am getting some emergency messages from my guys down there.
Yep.
And I hate to do this because this is wonderful. I love doing this. I would love to do this another time. Please don't be afraid to talk, to message me, Steve. Let me know if we can do this again. I got to go make sure my guys are okay, but there's some stuff going on and I got to make sure. Yeah, I just got to be there. So thank you guys.
And be safe. Be safe.
I will. Yeah, I promise I will. It's important. I have kids. I want to see my great grandkids. So, but again, ability and responsibility are very closely tied. I got the ability, so I'm going to go have that responsibility right this second. So be safe, my friends. Good luck. And
Thank you so much.
keep an eye out. I'll be around.
Yes, let's check back in. Absolutely.
I will. Take care, guys.
Yeah, just if you don't mind me adding a little more too, I think one of the big problems here is that we haven't seen the county attorney for Hennepin County, Mike Freeman, call for these issue a request to arrest these police officers. And so, I think it's pretty clear that the community in Minneapolis has no confidence in the Minneapolis Police Department to take care of its own failures, and that that there's been the FBI has been called in to investigate this situation, and the Bureau of Criminal Apprehension. But these organizations haven't done any justice in the past, and that is the thing that people are seeking here is justice. One of the things people keep saying down there is merchandise can be replaced, but George Floyd can't. This Black life mattered, and it mattered more than any physical belongings. And I think that's a really salient point. And it's kind of explanatory as to why some of this is happening. And it is unfortunate but true that the systems in our communities are not fulfilling the role of getting justice. And so I don't think we can rely on the FBI, because the FBI is ultimately under the control of the Trump administration. And I heard an interesting statistic earlier today. There's a place also called the Office of Police Conduct Review. It's where complaints go to die. And in 7 years they have sustained 10 cases. That's 0.36% of the national average. 0.36. I'm sorry. That's 0.36% of the cases that have been brought to them have been sustained, and the national average for that is 6 to 8%. Is my understanding. We don't have any confidence that the FBI is going to be effective in bringing justice to these. Well, let's be honest. This was a murder, right? And so I think what we need is an independent, elected, community-led investigation with the power over the Minneapolis Police Department to hire, fire, and review the budget processes, priorities, etc. And then we need that to be a permanent, democratically elected community control board over the police department there. And that's the only solution. We need to give the community a voice in these deliberations. And right now they don't have one, and they have not been treated fairly, and there's not any reason to believe that all of a sudden the FBI is going to swoop in here, which the FBI is run by, President Trump ultimately sets the direction of that organization. And for all we know, has stacked the organization with loyalists who will do nothing about this. So, and the other thing is, why is this happening? We, beyond the murder of George Floyd, we have a community that's been decimated by this coronavirus, by neoliberal reforms, government that hasn't been responsive to their needs, quite possibly ever. I'm sure that's probably an overstatement, I suppose, slightly, ever so slightly. But Yeah.
Yeah, and I watched today the press conference with the FBI. I don't know what her name was. I wish I had written it down. But the woman who was speaking on behalf of the FBI. And so, you know, essentially what she was saying was, we don't have enough. We don't have enough evidence. We need to make sure that we gather enough evidence before we actually follow through with an indictment of the police officer, you know, to arrest the police officer, because we don't have enough evidence. But what blows my mind is we all watched. This is why we're all so upset, because we all watched this police officer with his knee on someone's neck, and there were citizens standing there, and you can watch. I mean, it is, I don't even want to get too far into it, because it's heartbreaking. You're watching someone die. I mean, you're watching this man, and people telling him, look at what's happening. Look at what's happening. And this man just completely callously ignoring this person who has the power, not to mention the people who were around him watching this happen, the other police officers watching this happen, and not doing anything. So to say that there isn't evidence, to say that there isn't enough evidence, if anyone else ever did that, I mean, if anyone who wasn't considered a police officer, and of course, her response was that, you know, we do allow police to have a certain amount, to exert a certain amount of force, as long as it's not excessive. And so we have to be sure that in this situation that it fits that description of excessive. I can't imagine. It to even question whether that was excessive. You sat there with your knee on his neck so he couldn't breathe. What on earth could you consider that but excessive?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great point. That this is transparent to the community when politicians and, you know, bureaucrats get up on their podium or their soapbox and start saying, well, we need to have enough information. We have enough information. We all saw the video. The community is well aware that they have enough information to decide to indict these police officers. And so it's falling, that rhetoric is falling flat. Nobody's buying it. They might buy it on CNN and MSNBC, but nobody in the community actually believes that they need to gather more evidence. And people really, I hate to generalize, but, you know, people are very clear about what happened there. This is not it's not that it isn't a nuanced situation, but it's very clear that this man was wronged and he was murdered. And, you know, the details are to be worked out in an investigation, not before an investigation. So yeah, I think that's why we definitely need independent, elected, community-led investigation. The community has to be involved in this, and that's the only way that, not the only way, but that's a good thing to get the community involved with this. You know, and also, you know, what was the first thing one of the officers said when they had him pinned to the ground to the bystanders was that, oh, don't do drugs, kids. Well, this is ridiculous. You know, they were immediately trying to spin it as if he was not a good person and therefore he deserved it. And that's always what they do. It's this whole belief in a meritocracy, right? That everyone who's a good person already has a good job and lots of money, but that's not true. And we know it's not true because a lot of us are born without a lot of money, and that doesn't mean we're not good. That's just how we were born.
And I think that's a lot of, you know, what people are realizing these days is that it's this system. It's this, you know, there are systematic, I'm sorry, I always get systematic. There are systemic issues, and it's the way that the structure is. So we're all brought up with this kind of American dream, that, oh yeah, if you work hard enough, pull yourself up by your bootstraps and all that kind of stuff. And I think a lot of people have internalized that. Yet we've seen what's happened over the last few decades, especially, to really put people in a position where there isn't that hope for getting yourself to a stable, even just a stable place in life. I mean,
Right. Yeah. And this, let's not pretend this doesn't have anything to do with the presidential elections. I was watching coverage of the situation last night, and people were talking about Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden. And, when the political structures are not responsive to the people, they know it. Even if the news keeps telling us that, oh, everything's going to be all right, we picked somebody. People are well aware that Joe Biden doesn't represent the interests of the working class. They know that he's not going to bring a better world to them in Minneapolis. Not unless you're already doing well, because as he stated very clearly in his a remark at one point that was behind closed doors, nothing's going to change. He wants the status quo. I call him Status Quo Joe for that reason.
I'd say that's a pretty apt nickname. And it's really interesting also, I mean, if we want to talk about the presidential election, I mean, what about the Veep stakes, right? And we're talking about, different people who, of course, he's already committed that he wants to have a woman, that he's going to have a woman as his vice president. And, a lot of people were thinking about Klobuchar. Was Klobuchar going to be one of those people? And I think, here we are looking at the situation. This is obviously in Minnesota. That's Klobuchar's state. She was, what was her title? She was the, was it Attorney General for?
Attorney General, yeah.
Yeah, so she was Attorney General for Minneapolis. Now, this officer, he had been involved in many situations where there was violence against civilians. I think there were shootings against civilians that he was a part of, and yet there was never any. She chose not to prosecute. That was what her role would be to choose to prosecute. So when you talk about those statistics, when you talk about Minnesota, Klobuchar would have been the person who was making that decision, and she opted not to. So here's this police officer who has this power, has this authority over other people. He's not being held accountable by the people who are supposed to hold him accountable. He's not, not even investigated. And that was Klobuchar's decision. It was directly Klobuchar's responsibility. So it falls back to her. So, is she going to be the vice president? Especially, considering that Joe Biden, touts his support from the Black community. So.
Yeah, and this feeds into it as well. I think really, the people out there don't think that they're going to be well represented by Amy Klobuchar, because they have been represented by her, and it didn't help. She, I couldn't agree more. This is just horrifying.
All right, guys. Well, I guess we should wrap it up. We've been on here for like an hour and a half. I think, I think that this is a conversation that could go on for quite a while, and it could go into many different directions. And I think it should. This is a conversation that needs to be had. Like I said earlier, I think we've had a whole lot of gaslighting and people being told that that their concerns aren't valid. That not only do they realize that their lives do not matter equally to others, I think they've also been told that their concerns when they bring it up. And so when we see something like this that's in your face, it's on video, and you see exactly what happened, and all these people who have been gaslit for all this time, and made to feel like their concerns are irrational, or oh, you're just playing the race card, or blah blah blah, all these different things. I think we really need to have that conversation, and that's the problem with throwing, sweeping things under the rug. is that you don't have that conversation, and it gets to the point where you're forced to. So
Mhm.
I hope we
Yeah.
finally do.
Yep.
Yeah.
With this is not the kind of change we wanted, but this is the change we're getting.
Yep, absolutely. Well, thank you guys so much. I just appreciate you coming and talking with me, and I hope we can, I mean, obviously we're going to keep in touch because we're
Yep.
but I'd like to I'd like to keep up on obviously what's going on there, and I just,
Right.
like I said before, my heart goes out to you, and I just I hope we come
Right.
to some type of
Oh, another thing, I asked somebody this, and this is kind of an interesting side note, and I don't want to extend this any longer, but I can't shut up. Was that I asked DSA chat whether it was mostly corporate stores that got hit, and they said that's generally been true, right? Like it was Target, it was Cub Foods, not Cup Foods where you got Cub Foods, that's a chain, right? It was Aldi's. It was there was a Target, another Target in St. Paul that got hit. Pawn shops, right? So it's kind of interesting. I mean, it's like, and then the one thing we noticed going around, like one business had, it was like a little grocery store, and it said black owned, a sign on it, right? Or it had other ones that said like, we support, kind of George Floyd.
Mhm.
Yeah, we support George Floyd. Like we checked in our favorite coffee shop that's near us. Like, oh God, I hope they didn't hit that, right? And they had signs, and it's like I was telling Ryan when you dropped off. I said it's like putting a crucifix in your window or something. It's like no, we're okay. We're okay. Don't go after us. And it's like I mean I would love to be able to talk to some of these people who were doing this and like just to get a sense of what they're thinking, like I could just imagine they're driving around like, what should we hit next, right? And they're trying to figure out what would be a good spot or whatever, like, I mean, they're not acting politically, right? But they are acting politically, right? They don't have I mean, my guess is they don't have, they're not like Marxists and they have a whole strategy. They're probably going on more, just kind of like, oh, I hate that place. Let's hit that place, right? Or whatever, right? Like, why did they hit an Asian grocery store? I was telling Angie this, is that they want to get some rice or, like, to me, it's more like, oh, hate those Asian, maybe they've gotten treated badly. Or I know in LA when they had the Rodney King riots, the Korean convenience stores got just torched, like all of them, right?
Interesting. I did not know that.
Yeah. So, I mean, but it's interesting, as to like, I don't think it's about let's hit this place because, I mean, liquor stores, I can just see them hitting any liquor store. Why not? Right. But I think it is anti-corporate in a way, right? Like that. I think that is a thing. And
I can totally see that.
yeah. And I don't know. This is really, really crazy.
Hey, just to add a little bit to that, there was like one bookstore that was spared to Moon Palace Books, and like everything around it was destroyed, and they had Black Lives Matter stuff up in their windows and stuff. And I think there is an awareness in the community that that there are some businesses that are supportive of them, and obviously it's depends on who was there with the rock in their hand at the time, whether they recognize that.
Right. Well, I think at Moon Palace, they were actually like, they were passing out water or whatever. They were helping, like, serve the people. Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it's untouched. It's like right by the precinct. Right. Mm-hmm. And it was untouched. So I actually checked Twitter because I'm like, God, I hope it made it through the night. And yep, it had. I was like, oh, that's amazing. Right.
I wonder too, especially because, right now, of course, it's just kind of layers of crisis at this point, and, people we're very aware of small businesses. We're very aware of that. I think that's in people's consciousness because of the coronavirus and, the relief that's been going out and kind of the way that or I don't know, maybe it's just on my mind, maybe that's something, maybe I'm just looking at it through my own kind of prism, but
Well, another thing that you could say too is that people are starting to realize what is coronavirus hitting, right? It's hitting Black and brown people the worst, right? So here you have a bunch of people who know, like the government basically has it in for them. I actually read something that like when they realized that it was hitting Black and brown communities, they're like, let's open up, right?
Yeah.
Like that's very conscious, right? And so you're telling these people you are worthless in so many ways. So like, why shouldn't they do this, right? Like it's sort of like living for the absolute moment because you don't know if you're going to live tomorrow.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and I do think actually that that's kind of indicative of the fact that people recognize that our capitalist system, neoliberal as it is left them behind, based on the fact that they aren't getting their rent canceled, they aren't getting health care. All they need to do is look at the presidential election to know that hasn't been listened to, that the working class is not seen as worthy of health care. Well, right there,
Yeah, and especially throughout this whole crisis, I mean, that's something that we at Real Progressives focus on heavily, is the the notion that, not the notion, I don't know how to put it, that the fact that this is a choice, and what these packages and who is relieved and who is left behind is a choice that's made by our government, right? So the money is there, the money is created for what it needs to be allocated to, and yet here we are, with people still suffering. People in that, and knowing that that is a choice, that is a very clear indication of who is valued and who is not, right?
Exactly.
So
Exactly. It's a question of priorities. We can print as much money as we want. Modern monetary theory explains that, and we've been living in a modern monetary economy since the end of the Bretton Woods system. What was that, 1973, I want to say? And when big business needs money, they get it. It's right there, just like that. The 2008 financial crisis, they managed to bail those people out in what, a day, two? But these communities have been hurting for generations, and they get very little help, if any. And they know that. So I think there is a little bit of self-help going on here. There's a recognition that the powers that be, the political structures, aren't responsive to the Black community and the working class. Really, I think this is a working class uprising in response, in solidarity and unity with the Black community in Minneapolis. And so, yeah, anyway, this is a kind of self-help situation where they recognize that nobody's coming to save them, so they're going to help themselves in whatever way they can. And that's really sad. They deserve better. Black lives do matter. and everyone recognizes that that's not what's actually the case, even though it should be.
you're absolutely right. Well, it's a somber note to end on, but I think that's where we're at, So
All right. Thanks, Jody.
yeah, thanks for coming on. And
so much.
if you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching Real Progress in Action.